Hello, friends. I'm Eric Hutchinson. I'm the principal broker and owner of Hutchinson Realty. Welcome to video 3 of my new video series, How to Buy a Home in Northwest Arkansas. We have already talked about the first step, which is finding a realtor, and the second step in getting your financing in place so that you can make an offer on a new home in Northwest Arkansas. Today, we're going to be talking about a really important negotiating tool that we use all the time in real estate. It's called earnest money, and we're also going to be talking about the non-refundable deposit. What is earnest money? And on the non-refundable deposit, can you get it back? Is it really non-refundable? We're going to be talking about those things, and I hope that you will watch this video all the way through so that it can help you in negotiating your next home. We're going to be using the Arkansas real estate contract, and I'm going to show you your different options with earnest money and a non-refundable deposit. Let's start off and let's define what earnest money is. Earnest money is simply consideration from the buyer to the seller to show the seller that a buyer is serious about buying the seller's home. And in the past, it's always been a given that the buyer would lose that earnest money if they backed out for non-legitimate reasons. However, through the years, earnest money has kind of lost its punch because of litigation. Many times the buyer gets buyer's remorse, or they want to back out of the deal. They found another home that they like better, and they want that earnest money back. And all they have to do is not agree to where that earnest money is to be distributed. A third party or the listing firm can't release that money unless the buyer agrees. Same thing with the seller. The seller has to agree where that money goes, and therein lies the problem of earnest money. However, in the last few years, a non-refundable deposit has become very popular. It is kind of the new earnest money. So we're going to be talking about that. I'm going to use the Arkansas real estate contract so that you can kind of see how realtors use these two tools to help their buyers buy a home. So this is number 7 on the Arkansas real estate contract, and it talks about earnest money. Now, there used to be a really long paragraph about earnest money, but then they just went ahead and made an addendum for earnest money, which goes over the different options for earnest money. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on earnest money because, to be quite honest, it's not used a lot anymore. Now, through the years, it was used a lot. In fact, some sellers couldn't imagine accepting a contract without earnest money. But with all the litigation that's happened in our culture, many times the buyer will not release that earnest money, or the seller. Now, non-refundable deposit is being used more and more. Non-refundable deposit was originally kind of created for builders because builders would do upgrades for the buyer, and the builder didn't want to lose money. So they would say, well, you're going to have to put down a non-refundable deposit to allow for the upgrades. That way, if you back out, I haven't lost money. But if we close, that money will just be a deposit. It'll just be a down payment. So that's really what a non-refundable deposit is. However, in this seller's market that we have come into lately, non-refundable deposit has been used kind of like the earnest money used to be used when it was originally created. Now, buyers can submit a non-refundable deposit that says, here, Mr. Seller, here's some money that shows that I'm serious. And if I back out for any reason at all, you get to keep that money. And that's really what a non-refundable deposit is. However, if the buyer closes on the transaction, it's just a down payment. The buyer actually gets that money credited back to them at closing. So it is non-refundable if the buyer backs out of the deal, but it does get credited back to the buyer if the buyer closes. So you can look at number 8 where it talks about the non-refundable deposit. The deposit check is written directly to the sellers. It is not held with a third party. It is not held with the listing firm or an agent. It goes directly to the seller. The seller can commingle those funds in their checking account or savings account. They actually cash the check. And if the buyer closes, then the title company credits that money back to the buyer like a down payment. So I want you to know that it's a great tool, and you can see the different options that we've got. We've got, first of all, letter A under 8 says that there is not going to be any non-refundable deposit. But if you look at letter B, it says buyer will pay to the seller the deposit in the amount of, and let's just say $5,000. Now, that $5,000 can be given almost immediately after the seller accepts the contract, which is 1I, says within so many days following the date this real estate contract is accepted and signed between the buyer and the seller. And that's the best thing for the seller. However, what if the home doesn't pass home inspection? What if there's something hidden in the home? Well, the buyer would, if they back out of the deal, they lose that earnest money. So if you look at 2I under B, it says within 3 business days following agreement to repairs on inspection, repair, and survey addendum. So the buyer has 10 business days to do a home inspection. And so after the home inspection, sometimes the buyer submits an inspection repair addendum that says what repairs they want the seller to do. And if the seller agrees to those repairs, according to 2I under B, the buyer would then write a check for the $5,000 to the seller, and the seller would get that before closing. And again, if the buyer closes, it's credited back, but if they don't, then they lose that $5,000. That's a little bit better for the buyer. However, there's still some risk. What if the house doesn't appraise for the purchase price? The buyer could still lose it. Thus, you see 3I, which says other. And you could say that the buyer will submit the $5,000 after the home inspection and the appraisal. That's the most safest for the buyer, but that doesn't give the seller a lot of, incentive to take the buyer's offer. But I will tell you, this is a great tool. If you are a buyer and let's say you've got $10,000 to put down on a house and you really want this house and you're in a multiple offer situation, but you can only go so high. So maybe you offer the non-refundable deposit to incentivize the seller to take your offer over someone else's. It's a great tool. Ask your realtor about using this tool. So earnest money is still legitimate and you can still use it. It's just not used very much anymore. The non-refundable deposit is a great tool. One more thing, and I know we need to go. Sometimes you can split that deposit up. And so again, if we were using $5,000, we could say other 3I, and we could say $1,000 to be given within 3 business days after an accepted contract, and the other $4,000 to be given after a satisfactory home inspection and or appraisal. So you can kind of mix it up. You can give all of it in the beginning, some of it in the middle, or you can do all of it at once. So you've got some different options there. Ask your realtor about how this can help you in negotiating your next home. Well, we've used up all of our time, so thank you again for watching my video on earnest money and non-refundable deposit. I hope that you found it interesting, and I hope that you can use it in purchasing your next home. You can always reach out to me at info@hutchrealty.com, or you can visit our website where you can view every active listing in Northwest Arkansas or get a free home evaluation if you're a seller. I wish you the very best. I hope you will watch the other videos in this series, and no matter what, may God bless you and may God bless your home.